My name is Amelia Carter, and I am 34 years old. 3 months ago, I stood outside the St. Regis Hotel on Fifth Avenue in New York City, while 500 guests poured inside for my younger sister's wedding. The chandeliers sparkled through the tall windows. The string quartet was already warming up, and I was not on the guest list. I had RSVP'd 2 months earlier. I had bought a black cocktail dress from Nordstrom Rack for $200, thinking it would be enough. But when the receptionist looked down at her iPad and told me my name was not there, I already knew. This was not a mistake. My sister Victoria had erased me from her wedding on purpose. The humiliation burned deep. People in gowns and tuxedos swept past me, barely noticing that I was standing there, holding my phone with the confirmation email glowing on the screen. I dialed Victoria, and she answered. Her voice was full of champagne and laughter until she realized it was me. Then it turned cold. "Did you really think you'd be invited, Amelia?" Those words landed like ice water. She spoke about Robert's investors, about venture capital partners, and Goldman Sachs board members. She said she could not have her underemployed sister mingling with those people. She said my real estate career was not impressive enough. She said a 34-year-old single woman who could barely afford rent had no place among them. I stood there, breath caught in my throat, as she explained that this was about her future image, not about family, that she needed to project the right circle of connections, that I was an embarrassment. For a long moment, I just stared at the marble floor. Behind me, more guests were checking in, their diamonds catching the light. I felt invisible, like I had been erased not only from her wedding, but from our entire family story. "Finally," I whispered, "I understand perfectly." She seemed relieved. She said maybe we could have lunch next month. Then she hung up, but I did not collapse. My hands steadied as I reached into my clutch and pulled out the small cream envelope I had carried with me. Inside was not cash, not a check, but something far more powerful. Something that would reveal everything about who I really was. I handed it to the coordinator and said, "Please make sure the bride gets this. It is her wedding gift." My voice did not shake. I walked out into the October air, the sound of violins fading behind me. That was the night everything changed. And as I walked away, one thought echoed through me. Sometimes, the most powerful seat at the table is the one you choose not to take. I remember pausing on the sidewalk that night, looking back at the glowing windows of the St. Regis. Laughter spilled into the street, golden light bouncing off the marble walls. Inside, my family and 500 strangers toasted to a life that apparently did not include me. For the first time in my life, I realized something painful but liberating. I did not need to be in that ballroom to claim my worth. Walking away was not weakness, it was a choice. I took a deep breath, the kind that expands your chest until it hurts, and I promised myself that I would no longer beg for a seat at a table where I was unwelcome. That envelope I had left behind was not an act of revenge, it was a declaration. As I walked further into the night, memories tumbled over me. Holidays where my achievements were brushed aside. Dinners where every story belonged to Victoria, while mine were treated like children's games. They had defined me as the underachieving sister for years. That night, I defined myself differently. And before I continue, let me pause here. Because I know many of you watching this have stood in my shoes. Maybe not outside a luxury wedding, but in a moment where your family or friends made you feel invisible. If that resonates with you, I want to say something important. You are not alone. If you connect with stories about drawing boundaries and finding your strength, this is your space. Please hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is right now. I read those comments, and they remind me that across time zones and oceans, we are building a community of people who refuse to be erased. That night outside the St. Regis, I felt erased. But in reality, I was about to step into the clearest definition of myself I had ever known. I did not know exactly how Victoria would react when she opened the envelope. I imagined her in her $30,000 gown, surrounded by venture capitalists and executives, smiling that smile she practiced for photographs. I imagined her sliding her manicured finger beneath the seal, expecting to find cash or a polite card. Instead, she would discover the truth she had ignored for years, the truth that I was not the failure she painted me to be. That envelope held my name in bold black letters. It carried proof that the sister she had dismissed as a side hustler was actually holding the kind of power she worshipped. And yet, more importantly, it was my way of saying, "Your definition of success is not mine." As I reached my apartment that night, I stood in front of the mirror, still wearing that simple black dress. I looked at myself and whispered, "You did not break." My phone buzzed with a message from Mom asking where I was. I typed back, "Victoria uninvited me. I am going home." I knew the ripple of excuses and whispers would follow. I knew Victoria would spin a story. But for the first time, I did not care. Some doors are meant to close. Some bridges are meant to burn. And in the firelight, you finally see the path you were supposed to walk all along. I fell asleep that night with my phone face down, the envelope already in Victoria's possession. I had no idea she would call me 47 times before the night was over. I had no idea the ballroom would fall silent when she read my name aloud. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I had finally stopped shrinking to fit their vision of me. And once you taste that kind of freedom, there is no going back. I need to take you back 8 years. Because what happened at the St. Regis was not born in a single night. It was the final chapter of a long story where I was cast in a role I never auditioned for. 8 years ago, I walked out of a corporate accounting office with my diploma framed on the wall and a steady salary deposited every 2 weeks. People said I was secure, stable, safe. But I felt like I was suffocating under fluorescent lights, crunching numbers that meant nothing to me. My coworkers joked about promotions and pensions, while I dreamed of something larger. I made a decision that shocked everyone. I left. I got my real estate license. I traded spreadsheets for open houses, heels on marble floors, and conversations with families imagining their futures. It was a leap of faith, and for me, it felt alive. But to my family, especially Victoria, it was a joke. I still remember that first Christmas after I quit. Victoria sat at the table, fresh from her MBA program, already a rising star in marketing. She spoke about Fortune 500 clients and six-figure bonuses while my parents beamed with pride. Then, inevitably, the spotlight turned to me. "How are the house showings going, Amelia?" my mom asked, her tone dripping with condescension, as though she were asking about a lemonade stand. "It's good," I replied, hiding the fact that I had just closed on a property worth more than most people's lifetime savings. I never told them about the clients who trusted me with their biggest financial decisions. Why bother? They had already decided my work was a hobby, not a career. Victoria leaned back, her wineglass catching the candlelight. "Fine isn't thriving," she said. "When Robert's company goes public next year, we'll be set for life. What's your plan? Show houses until you're 60? The table laughed softly, and I swallowed the sting of their words. That was the rhythm of every family gathering. Victoria's triumphs displayed like jewels, my achievements dismissed like children's toys. I learned to nod, to sip my wine, to keep my victories quiet, because when I spoke them aloud, they either rolled their eyes or ignored me completely. The truth is, I was building something none of them could see. My career was not about quick commissions. It was about strategy, networking, and understanding markets in a way that no MBA textbook could teach. I was learning the heartbeat of New York real estate, from cramped two-bedroom apartments in Queens to glass towers overlooking Central Park. But my family did not ask. They did not want to know. To them, I was the cautionary tale, the one who had thrown away her degree, the one who would serve as proof that you must never deviate from the traditional path. Last Christmas was the worst. Victoria, newly engaged, sat beside Robert with her diamond flashing under the lights. She went on and on about their combined income, their 5-year plan, the Hamptons property they were considering. My mom joined in, telling me I should think about my future, reminding me that freelance real estate was not a retirement plan. "You should get a job at Victoria's company," Mom suggested. She could put in a word. "I'm doing fine," I answered simply. "Fine isn't thriving," Victoria repeated, cutting into her prime rib. What I wanted to say was that Blackstone, the largest real estate investment firm in the world, had already contacted me, that I was interviewing for a position that would redefine everything, but I kept it to myself, because defending myself to them was like shouting into the wind. They had already written my character in the family story. I was the underachieving sister, the one they pitied, the one they whispered about after dinner. And yet, as much as it hurt, I let them. Because I knew that someday, the truth would surface. That truth was sealed in the cream envelope I carried into the St. Regis, and Victoria had no idea her dismissal of me that night would ignite the very fire she had been mocking for years. This is the part of the story most people overlook. The quiet years. The years when you are invisible, dismissed, underestimated. Those are the years when you are actually building, brick by brick, deal by deal, dream by dream. When they laughed at me, I was learning how to negotiate. When they ignored me, I was mastering markets they could not even pronounce. When they dismissed me, I was earning the trust of investors who would later shake the foundation of Robert's empire. The night of the wedding was not my downfall, it was my unveiling. And sometimes the sharpest revenge is not loud or cruel. It is quiet success that no one can take away. The erasure did not stop with dismissive words at family dinners. Over time, it seeped into every milestone of Victoria's life, and with each omission, I felt myself disappearing further from the picture. The wounds cut deeper not because of strangers, but because they came from my own blood. I found out about Victoria's engagement through Instagram. A carefully staged photo of her manicured hand, a 3-carat diamond sparkling against a latte background. Hashtag he said yes. There was no phone call, no text, no private moment between sisters. By the time I picked up the phone to congratulate her, 50 other people had already commented on the post. Her voice was airy, distracted. "Oh, Amelia, sorry. It's been so crazy. You know how at Island." Except I didn't know. I had never been asked to know. When the family group chat for wedding planning began, my phone stayed silent. I discovered its existence only when Mom mistakenly forwarded me a screenshot meant for Victoria. The list of names glowed on the screen. Mom, Victoria, our aunts, female cousins, everyone, except me. I asked about it once, and Mom's excuse was almost worse than the omission. "We didn't want to make you feel bad, honey. You know, since you don't have experience with these things." These things, as if love, flowers, and vows required credentials I didn't have. Then came the bridesmaid selection. Victoria announced her lineup proudly. Her 3 college roommates, Robert's sister, and 2 cousins I barely knew she still kept in touch with. When an aunt asked why her own sister wasn't included, Victoria's laugh was like a blade. "Amelia isn't really the bridesmaid type. She's more comfortable behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. Invisible. The single sister who didn't fit the picture-perfect aesthetic. But the deepest wound arrived just a month before the wedding. Victoria posted a long, heartfelt tribute online to all the important women who had carried her through life. She named her mentor, her yoga instructor, even her hairdresser. My name wasn't there, not a single word. It was like I had been erased from the script of her existence. I read that post 3 times, my chest tightening with every sentence. It wasn't simply about not being invited to stand at the altar or missing out on dress fittings. It was about the systematic rewriting of our family narrative, one where I no longer existed. I had become the ghost at every gathering, the placeholder seat at Christmas dinners, the forgotten relative who surfaced only when they needed someone to compare themselves against. And for too long I allowed it. I smiled through the slights. I kept quiet through the comparisons. I accepted my role as the family's cautionary Talitha, one who supposedly chose instability over security. They didn't understand that the path I was walking was not weakness, it was conviction. Ghosts, though, have a funny way of returning at the most inconvenient moments. Standing outside the St. Regis, clutching that envelope, I realized the irony. They had worked so hard to erase me that they had given me the perfect stage to reappear. They left me out of their milestones, so I created my own. And this milestone would be written not with hashtags or staged photos, but with truth they could not spin away. It is easy to underestimate someone you never bothered to look at. It is easy to dismiss the sister who chose a different path. But when the truth finally emerges, it does not arrive quietly. It erupts. And sometimes the eruption comes in the form of a small cream envelope sliding across a marble counter. I was no longer content to be a ghost. Every omission, every mocking laugh, every seat I wasn't offered in their celebrations all led to this. They believed success was about public applause, about curated images, about who made the guest list. I believed success was about quiet strength, about dignity that cannot be taken, about choosing where to place your worth. And as I stood in the cold October air, the truth settled over me. They hadn't erased me. They had revealed themselves. Because real family doesn't need proof of your value to give you a seat at their table. Real family sees you before the world applauds. And when they don't, that's when you stop knocking on locked doors. That's when you start building your own house. I remember the cold air biting my skin as I stepped farther from the marble lobby of the St. Regis. The hum of strings and the echo of clinking glasses bled through the tall glass windows. I stood on the curb for a long moment, holding my clutch in one hand, the cream envelope no longer inside. My heels ached, but the real weight pressing down on me was heavier than anything physical. That envelope contained more than paper. It carried a choice. I could have marched back into that ballroom. I could have demanded that security check my name again, insisted on seeing the wedding coordinator, maybe even confronted Victoria face to face before she walked down the aisle. I could have fought for my place at a table that had already been stripped from me. That is what the old version of me would have done, begged, explained, apologized, made myself small just to keep some fragile sense of belonging. But something shifted as I looked up at those glittering chandeliers. For the first time, I realized not every table is worth sitting at. I thought of the years I had spent trying to prove myself to a family who never wanted to see me. Every deal I closed, every client who trusted me, every property portfolio I built all vanished in their eyes the moment Victoria opened her mouth. To them, I was the one who had chosen instability, the sister who failed the unspoken test of success. But success in their language meant wealth displayed like jewelry, status flaunted like a trophy. I no longer wanted to speak that language. The choice was clear. I would not beg. I would not force myself into a celebration where my presence was unwanted. Instead, I would let that envelope do the speaking for me. It was more eloquent than any toast, more piercing than any confrontation. As I turned my back on the hotel, a thought crossed my mind that made me almost smile. Ghosts don't shout, they haunt silently. That night I chose silence, but silence with power. And here's where I want to pause and ask you, the one listening to my story. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have demanded entry, raised your voice, and risked humiliation just to be present? Or would you have done what I did, walked away with dignity intact, leaving behind a truth too heavy to ignore? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story, because we learn from each other's choices. Walking down Fifth Avenue, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Where are you? Ceremony starting soon. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Then I typed the words that had been waiting for years. Victoria uninvited me. I'm going home. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then again. Finally, she replied. There must be a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. For the first time, everything was crystal clear. I flagged a taxi but didn't get inside right away. I stood there, the October wind lifting my hair, and let the moment settle into me. I was losing something: connections to extended relatives, the chance to be seen at family gatherings, the opportunity to rewrite my role in their story. But what I gained was more valuable: my self-respect. When I finally slid into the back seat of that cab, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I simply breathed. I told myself that some bridges are meant to burn. And sometimes the smoke from those flames shows you the path you were meant to follow all along. That night, I walked into my small apartment, hung up my dress, and placed my clutch on the dresser. I lay in bed, knowing my phone would explode with calls once that envelope was opened. But for the first time in years, I was ready. Because this time, I wasn't the one begging for acceptance. This time, they would be the ones calling my name. The storm began just as I expected, though I underestimated its force. I was halfway through a plate of pasta arrabbiata at a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from the St. Regis when my phone started to buzz. At first, I thought it was just Mom again, checking if I had changed my mind. But when the screen lit up, I saw Victoria's name flashing across it. I let it ring out. The waiter poured me a glass of wine, and I tried to focus on the taste of tomatoes and garlic. But then it buzzed again. And again. The vibrations became so constant that the phone moved across the table like it had a mind of its own. 47 missed calls, 23 frantic texts. What is this? Is this real? Call me now. Please, Amelia, answer me. I'm sorry. Just call me. I flipped the phone face down, but I could feel the panic spilling through the screen. The people at the tables beside me began to notice. One older couple whispered as they glanced toward the glowing rectangle that refused to stay quiet. The waiter asked gently, "Is everything all right, miss?" I smiled, lifted my glass, and replied, "Perfect," and I meant it. For years, my phone had been a leash buzzing with demands, comparisons, reminders that I wasn't enough. Tonight, for the first time, it felt like freedom. Each missed call was proof that the envelope had done its work. I pictured the scene in the ballroom, Victoria, in her $30,000 dress, surrounded by Robert's investors, her bridesmaids hovering nervously. I imagined her opening the envelope with that same smug smile she always wore when she expected something beneath her. Maybe she thought it was cash, maybe a sentimental card she could wave away with false humility. But instead, she found my business card. Simply, elegant. My name, my title, my company. Senior Vice President. Blackstone Real Estate Partners. I imagined her hands trembling, the whispers starting around her, phones coming out, Google searches racing. The same guests she wanted to impress now staring at her, wondering why she had banished her own sister, the woman quietly managing portfolios larger than Robert's entire company. And then the calls to me began. Mom's messages were a mix of outrage and disbelief. "How could you do this to your sister? She's having a breakdown. Answer your phone." Robert called too, his number lighting up my screen though I had never saved it. Even numbers I didn't recognize appear probably borrowed phones from desperate friends. It would have been easy to give in, to answer, to explain, to soothe their panic. But I had done that too many times before. Every time I explained myself, it only gave them more power to dismiss me. Tonight, I chose silence. Instead of answering, I powered the phone off. The screen went black, the noise stopped. For the first time in years, there was quiet. I savored my pasta even though it had gone cold. I sipped my wine slowly, watching the candlelight dance against the glass. Around me, couples laughed, families clinked glasses, strangers celebrated birthdays, and I, the so-called family failure, was finally celebrating something too, my own control. Not because I had embarrassed Victoria, not because I had shocked a ballroom of strangers, but because I had finally refused to play the role they had written for me. The old me would have answered every call, apologized, tried to fix what was never mine to fix. The new me pressed the power button and asked for another glass of wine. And as I walked home later that night, the streets buzzing with taxis and late-night laughter, I felt a stillness inside me that I had never known. I wasn't nervous about the fallout. I wasn't dreading the family meetings or the angry texts. I knew they would come. I knew the storm had only begun. But storms don't scare me anymore. Because storms clear the air. And after years of suffocating in silence, I was ready to breathe again. The next morning, I powered my phone back on. The screen nearly exploded with notifications over 100 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, messages stacked on top of one another. I didn't open them all. I didn't need to. Just one glance told me everything. Victoria's texts shifted from outrage to panic. "Is this real? Blackstone, Senior Vice President? Please tell me it's a mistake. Then, I Googled it. Your face is on their website. How could you not tell us? Please, please call me. Robert's tone was cooler but no less desperate. 3 of our investors are asking about you. Apparently you've worked with them before. Why didn't you say anything? Please, Amelia, we need to talk. And then came the voicemail from my mother, her voice sharp with fear and disbelief. Amelia, what is going on? Your sister says you're an executive at Blackstone managing hundreds of millions of dollars. That's ridiculous. You sell houses. You can barely pay your rent. Call me this instant. Even now, even with my name in black letters on Blackstone's website, they couldn't believe it. They still clung to the picture they had painted of me years ago. The sister who played with houses. The family failure who lived paycheck to paycheck. But the truth was undeniable. The business card I left in that envelope wasn't just a card. It was a weapon. One side carried my title, my company, my office address. The other side carried my handwriting. I was going to announce this at your reception and give you the keys to the Riverside penthouse, the one you loved. But it seems successful people don't belong at your wedding. Congratulations on your marriage. The penthouse will be donated to charity in your name. I imagined the silence in that ballroom when she read it aloud. Guests pulling out their phones, searching my name. The whispers spreading. The investors realizing the woman Victoria had dismissed was someone they had already trusted with their portfolios. And Victoria standing there, her carefully curated image cracking in front of everyone she wanted to impress. For years she defined success as being admired in public. Now the same public she valued most was watching her unravel. And yet, this story was far from over. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew was, that the card was only the beginning. 6 months earlier, I had received an email that changed everything. Blackstone Real Estate Partners, the largest real estate investment firm in the world, had seen my work. They wanted me. The interviews were grueling, 6 rounds across 3 months, but I earned my place. I was appointed Senior Vice President, overseeing a portfolio worth $500 million. The signing bonus alone was more than Victoria and Robert's combined annual salaries. But I had kept it quiet, not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned the hard way that sharing success with people who don't value you is like pouring water into a broken vase. It all spills out, wasted. That night, when Victoria opened the envelope, the truth spilled everywhere. And for once, it couldn't be ignored. I want to pause here to tell you something important. Too often, the world underestimates people like us, the ones who walk a different path, who refuse to fit into a neat box. They laugh, they dismiss, they erase, until the day they can't. If you've ever felt invisible, keep building anyway, keep fighting anyway. Because one day, your truth will rise so loud that no one can look away. And trust me, the story doesn't end with a business card. That was only the spark. What came after set fire to every illusion my family ever held about me, about success, and about what it truly means to belong. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal next will change everything. 6 months before that infamous wedding, my life had already begun to shift. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was showing a cramped 2-bedroom in Queens to a young couple debating whether they could fit a nursery into the second room. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I ignored emails during showings. Most turned out to be spam investment offers or automated alerts, but something made me glance down. The subject line read, "Opportunity with Blackstone Real Estate Partners." I nearly deleted it. Real estate agents like me were flooded with scam pitches every week, but something about the sender's address, champson@blackstone.com, gave me pause. I opened it right there in that musty apartment, the couple still measuring closet space behind me. "Dear Miss Carter," it began, "following your exceptional handling of the Riverside portfolio disposition and your innovative approach to our Chelsea development project, Blackstone Real Estate Partners would like to discuss a senior position within our New York office." My heart stopped. Blackstone, the largest real estate investment firm in the world, managing over $1 trillion in assets. They were not in the business of sending casual invitations. If they had noticed me, It meant my quiet work had echoed into places I never dreamed. The next 3 months were a blur of interviews, assessments, strategy presentations. They flew me to Manhattan, sat me across from executives whose names I had only read in the Wall Street Journal. They grilled me on everything: market trends, international investment strategies, portfolio management at scale. And every time, I left the room thinking I had failed. But the calls kept coming. Finally, 1 week before Victoria's wedding, I received the offer. Senior Vice President of Real Estate Acquisitions. My portfolio: $500 million in luxury residential properties across the tri-state area. My salary dwarfed Victoria and Robert's combined income. The signing bonus alone could have bought me the kind of car my father always said real professionals drove. But I wasn't thinking about cars. I was thinking about an apartment. 2 years earlier, Victoria had dragged me to tour a penthouse on the Upper East Side. A 3-bedroom masterpiece with floor-to-ceiling windows that opened onto sweeping views of Central Park. She had walked through every room in awe, snapping photos, saying over and over, "This will be my dream home when Robert's company goes public." She plastered it on her vision board, made it the wallpaper on her laptop. But the thing about dreams is, they often stay dreams. When the owner of that very penthouse filed for divorce and needed a fast cash sale, I saw my chance. I leveraged every connection, every deal I had nurtured, and made an offer. Cash. Closed in 30 days. $2,800,000. I bought the penthouse Victoria had claimed as hers in her imagination. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. I kept the keys locked in my safe deposit box, waiting for the perfect moment. My plan was simple. At the wedding reception, when the champagne flowed and the toasts began, I would stand up. I would speak from the heart, telling the world how proud I was of my sister. And then, I would hand her the keys, the underestimated sister giving the ultimate gift. Proof that success doesn't need to look the same to be real. But she never gave me the chance. When she erased my name from her guest list, she erased that future. She didn't know that by excluding me, she had excluded her own dream. That penthouse key remained in my possession. And as I stared at it in the bank vault the morning after her wedding, I realized it no longer belonged to her story. It belonged to mine. What I chose to do with it would not just redefine me, would send ripples through every assumption my family had ever made about who I was and what I was worth. And here's the truth. That decision became the turning point. Not for me, I was already rising, but for her. Because when she lost that penthouse, she lost more than an apartment. She lost the illusion that success could be hoarded by appearances alone. But you'll see, the fallout of that decision was only just beginning. 3 days after the wedding, the phone call came. Not from Victoria, not from Mom, but from Dad, the one person who usually floated above the storm. His voice was heavy, like he had aged years in just a few days. "Amelia, we need you at the house. Family meeting tonight at 7. I almost laughed. A family meeting? As if this was a business dispute that needed arbitration. As if my life was a quarterly report that required explaining. "I'm not coming," I said. "Your sister is devastated. Your mother is beside herself. The least you can do is explain yourself." "Explain what? That I earned a promotion? That I worked for years while you all called it a hobby? What exactly do you want me to explain?" He sighed. The kind of sigh that once could guilt me into silence. "Not anymore. Just 1 hour, Amelia. That's all we're asking." But I had already given them years of hours they never valued. "You can have your meeting. I won't be there." And I didn't go. But my cousin Sarah, bless her, sent me updates in real time. The Mitchell living room was crowded that night. Mom and Dad, Victoria and Robert, 3 aunts, 2 uncles, cousins, lined up on the sofa. All of them staring at Victoria as she stood in the center, holding up my business card like it was a piece of damning evidence. "Grace Mitchell, Senior Vice President, Real Estate Acquisitions, Blackstone Real Estate Partners." She read aloud, her voice catching on the word senior. Then the questions came. How long had I been working there? Why didn't anyone know? Was this why I hadn't shown up to the wedding? When one aunt asked point blank, "Wait, Victoria, you uninvited your own sister? The room went silent. Victoria tried to twist it. She said there had been a mix-up, that she thought I would feel uncomfortable around Robert's investors, that she was only trying to protect me. Protect her? Uncle James actually laughed. You erased her name from the guest list. She's an executive at Blackstone and you thought she'd be embarrassed by a few startup investors? The dam broke after that. Robert tried to salvage things, insisting they didn't know about my position, that of course I would have been invited if they had, but Aunt Patricia cut him off. So she's only welcome if she's successful enough? What kind of family operates like that? 10D2. Mom jumped in, trying to spin it. Amelia should have told us. We're her family. Why would she hide this from us? And that's when Sarah spoke, her voice sharp as glass. Maybe because you've spent 8 years telling her she was a failure. The living room fractured. Voices rose. Sides were chosen. Victoria cried. Robert made excuses. My mother insisted it was all a misunderstanding. And in the middle of it all, one question echoed louder than the rest. Where is Amelia? I was in my apartment, reviewing contracts for a new acquisition, sipping tea in the quiet. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years they had dismissed me as unworthy. Now, my absence carried more weight than my presence ever had. I could almost picture them, sitting there in chaos, while I built the life they swore I wasn't capable of. And here's where I want to pause and ask you something. If you were your family erased you, only to beg for your presence once they realized your success, would you go back to explain yourself? Or would you let your silence speak for you? Share your answer in the comments. I truly want to know, because I think we've all been at a crossroads like this, in some way. That night, they argued about me for hours. But I didn't give them what they wanted. My absence was my answer. And in many ways, that silence shook them harder than any speech I could have delivered. Because sometimes the loudest statement you can make is not showing up. And while they wrestled with their guilt, I was already preparing for the next step, the moment when Victoria would realize what I had done with the penthouse she once called her dream. The call came the very next morning. For once, I answered. I wanted to hear her voice when she realized the truth. You bought it? Victoria's tone was thin, almost broken. You actually bought my dream apartment? I held the phone steady. I bought an apartment. It was never yours. It only existed on your vision board. Her breath hitched. But you knew I wanted it. You knew it was mine. My penthouse. I almost laughed. The entitlement in her voice was the same tone she used when we were children, when she would grab toys from my hands and declare them hers simply because she wanted them. Only this time, it wasn't a plastic doll or a sweater. It was a $2,800,000 property overlooking Central Park. You're right, I said calmly. I did know you wanted it. That's why I bought it. And I was going to give it to you. The keys were supposed to be your wedding gift. Silence. Long, heavy silence. I thought she might have hung up. Then her whisper came through the line. You were going to give me a $3 million apartment? 2.8, I corrected. But yes, that was the plan. A gift. From the sister you thought was too much of a failure to even attend your wedding. The silence stretched again, broken only by her muffled sob. Please, Amelia, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Can we fix this? But some things cannot be fixed. Some bridges burn too brightly to ever be rebuilt. You didn't just uninvite me, I said quietly. You erased me. And you did it publicly, on what should have been a day of love. There is no going back from that. She begged. She told me that she and Robert had been saving for years, that the penthouse would change their lives. But as she spoke, I thought of the years I had lived beneath their judgment, the nights I cried silently because nothing I did was enough, the endless family dinners where my success was dismissed as a hobby. And I thought of the women who truly needed change. That morning, before answering her call, I had already met with my attorney and Maria Santos, the director of the Women's Shelter of New York. We sat in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Midtown. Maria's eyes widened when she saw the documents. Miss Carter, I need to confirm. This is a $2.8 million penthouse. Are you certain you want to donate it entirely? Yes, I said without hesitation. I want it to house women who have been told they are nothing, women starting over, women who need a chance to prove everyone wrong. Let this be the place where they begin again. Maria pressed her hands together, overcome. Do you realize what this means? The sale of this property could fund our shelter for the next 5 years. Or we could convert it into transitional housing for 12 women at a time. Either way, it will save lives. That was what I wanted. To turn my sister's rejection into someone else's redemption. When I hung up with Victoria later that day, I instructed my attorney to finalize the transfer. A few hours later, the paperwork was complete. The penthouse was no longer mine. It now belonged to the Women's Shelter of New York. I sent Victoria one last email with the subject line, "Your wedding gift has found a better home." Attached were the documents: deed transfer, donation valuation, tax acknowledgments, and a letter from the shelter thanking me for the most generous donation in their history. Within minutes, my phone lit up again. 17 calls from Victoria. 10 from Robert, 23 from Mom. I answered none. Instead, I sat in my new office at Blackstone, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Park Avenue, and let the city hum beneath me. For the first time, I wasn't chasing their approval. I was living my life on my own terms. That night Sarah texted me. "Victoria just told everyone you gave away her apartment to charity. Uncle James said it wasn't her apartment if she never owned it." She ran out crying. I set my phone down, turned back to my desk, and signed off on a new acquisition deal worth over $100 million. The penthouse was gone. But in giving it away, I had reclaimed something priceless: me dignity, my freedom, and the ability to define success, not by possession, but by impact. Victoria lost her dream. I gave dozens of women a chance to rebuild theirs. And in that choice, I discovered the true power of walking away. 2 weeks after the wedding, on a Tuesday morning, my assistant James called my office line. His voice was steady, but carried an undertone of unease. "Miss Carter, there's a woman in the lobby insisting she's your sister. Security won't let her up without your approval. Do you want me to authorize?" I swiveled in my chair and looked at the monitor on my desk. There she was, Victoria, standing in the marble lobby of Blackstone's headquarters, dressed in a designer suit, her hair perfectly blown out, but her posture betrayed her. Shoulders hunched, eyes darting. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "She doesn't have an appointment," I said. "Our policy is clear." James hesitated. "So you'd like me to?" "Yes. Inform security." I watched on the monitor as the guard explained to her that she couldn't access the elevators. She argued, pulled out her phone, and a second later, mine lit up on the desk. I didn't answer. Her voicemail came through within minutes. "I'm in your lobby, Amelia. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But we're sisters. That has to mean something." Her voice cracked on the word sisters. For a brief second, a pang of old loyalty tugged at me, but then I remembered. I remembered standing outside the St. Regis while she told me I wasn't enough. I remembered every family dinner where she had smirked as my accomplishments were brushed aside. I remembered 8 years of being mocked, erased, and dismissed. I opened a blank email instead of calling her back. "Victoria, boundaries are not suggestions. They are not negotiable. You made it clear at your wedding that success was your entry requirement for family. Now that you know I've exceeded that requirement, you want to change the rules. But that's not how this works. I wish you and Robert happiness. I hope you find your dream home someday through your own efforts. But I will not be part of your life moving forward. This is not punishment or revenge. This is a choice. The same choice you made when you erased me from your guest list. The difference is, I'm honest about mine. Please don't come to my office again. Security has your photo now." I signed it simply, Amelia. On the monitor, I saw her check her phone. She read the email right there in the lobby. Her shoulders sagged, her posture crumbled, and she stood frozen for nearly 10 minutes before finally turning and walking out into the Manhattan morning. That was the last time she tried to reach me in person. The following weeks, the family pressure intensified. Mom called daily. Dad left long voicemails urging me to forgive. My aunts sent text messages filled with emotional appeals about family bonds. But I didn't yield. My silence was my answer. Meanwhile, my world at Blackstone expanded. Every morning I entered that glass tower, greeted by a staff who respected my boundaries, colleagues who valued my insights. I thrived in a way my family had never imagined possible. I was no longer the sister who sold houses. I was Amelia Carter, Senior Vice President, overseeing a $500 million portfolio. And yet, there was a strange poetry in Victoria showing up at my office. For years she had been the gatekeeper, deciding who belonged and who didn't. At her wedding she locked me out. But at Blackstone, the gates were mine to control. The symmetry was undeniable. For so long I had wanted her approval. I had begged for recognition, fought to prove I was enough. But as I watched her leave the lobby that day, I realized something profound. I no longer needed anything from her. Not her apology. Not her validation. Not her presence in my life. The story she had written about me was over. I was writing my own now, and she wasn't in it. Sometimes power doesn't look like shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes power looks like sitting in a corner office, sipping coffee, and calmly instructing your assistant to enforce a boundary. And for me, that was enough. The ripple effect of that wedding night began quietly, like cracks in a frozen lake. But soon the ice split wide, and Victoria's carefully curated image collapsed beneath her feet. It started with Robert's investors. Word spread quickly in New York's close-knit financial circles. His new wife had uninvited a senior vice president from Blackstone to her own wedding. At first, it sounded like gossip, a petty family dispute. But then people confirmed ITs. I was on Blackstone's leadership page. Yes, I was managing a $500 million portfolio. Yes, 3 of those very investors had already worked with me directly. One of them, the founding partner at Sequoia Capital, was blunt. Your wife uninvited Amelia Carter? The same Amelia Carter who handles my family's $30 million portfolio? That shows remarkably poor judgment. The words cut through Robert's boardroom like glass. Within weeks, 2 potential investors pulled out of his Series B funding round, citing concerns about the leadership team's decision-making. And the fallout didn't stop there. Robert's own board convened an emergency meeting. Having a spouse who alienated major players in finance wasn't the image they wanted for their CEO. They didn't fire him, but they set a new policy. Victoria was no longer welcome at corporate events. The very world she had clawed to impress now shut its doors on her. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished. Blackstone thrived under my leadership, and my name began to appear in places my family couldn't ignore. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature on rising real estate leaders, my photo framed by a headline about innovative portfolio management. My face even appeared in the Financial Times. Mom mailed me a clipping with a note scrawled across the top. So proud of you, sweetheart. Always knew you'd make something of yourself. Always knew. Revisionist history at its finest. But Victoria couldn't rewrite her own narrative so easily. Her Instagram feed, once a glossy parade of champagne toasts and designer outfits, went eerily silent. The honeymoon photos never appeared. The glamorous Mr. and Mrs. posts stopped altogether. Sarah told me she had taken a mental health break from work, which was polite code for being too humiliated to show her face. The golden couple who had once been untouchable were suddenly ordinary. Investors whispered about them with raised eyebrows. Colleagues looked at them with pity instead of envy. And beneath it all, Victoria struggled with the truth. The sister she had dismissed as a failure was not only successful, but more powerful than the circles she worshipped. I'll admit, there was a part of me that took satisfaction in watching the scales balance. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. For years I had been cast as the family failure, the cautionary tale. Now the world saw me for who I really was. And yet, the most dramatic ripple was still to come. Because while Victoria scrambled to rebuild her reputation, the penthouse she once claimed as her dream had already been transformed into something far greater. I had donated it to the Women's Shelter of New York. The sale was pending, the papers signed, the announcement scheduled. And once the news became public, it wouldn't just devastate. Victoria would rewrite the meaning of success for everyone watching. Before I tell you what happened when that news broke, I want to pause here. Because I know many of you listening have faced a similar crossroads. Stay silent, or let your truth speak? Tell me in the comments if you ever set a boundary so firm that it shook the ground beneath people who underestimated you. Trust me, the twist that came next was one even I couldn't have scripted. And it all began with the moment Victoria discovered the penthouse donation was more than just a rumor. The announcement of the penthouse donation hit like a lightning strike. The Women's Shelter of New York released a press statement thanking me for the most generous single donation in their history. The property had sold for over $3 million, enough to fund operations for years and open a new transitional housing program for women rebuilding their lives. The news spread fast. Within hours, articles appeared online. Blackstone VP donates multi-million-dollar penthouse to Women's Shelter. Photos of the building, the same one Victoria had once paraded across her vision board, were everywhere. My name was in the headlines, not as the family failure, but as a woman who turned wealth into impact. Sarah texted me screenshots from group chats. "Your mom keeps saying it was all a misunderstanding." Victoria's melting down. "She told people you stole her apartment." Uncle James had replied bluntly, "It wasn't hers. You can't steal something you never owned." The silence on Victoria's social media became deafening. For years she had posted every brunch, every vacation, every minor promotion like it was a crown jewel. Now, nothing. No wedding photos, no honeymoon snapshots, no smiling couple selfies. The glamorous feed that had once defined her identity became a barren page. Sarah told me, whispers circulated at her office. Colleagues exchanged glances when she walked in, pity mixing with curiosity. People were no longer asking about her marketing campaigns or Robert's startup. They were asking about me. Meanwhile, my world grew brighter. Blackstone promoted me to executive vice president 8 months after the wedding. My portfolio doubled to over $1 billion. The Financial Times printed my face beside the headline, "Young Power Broker, Reshaping Manhattan Luxury Real Estate." Victoria never called to congratulate me, but Sarah said she printed the article and cried at her desk. The texts kept coming, though. Sporadic, desperate messages that pinged my phone every few weeks. I think about that night every day. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand toxic family patterns. I was wrong about everything. I miss my sister. That last one almost cracked me. Almost. But then I remembered. I remembered standing outside the St. Regis, humiliated. I remembered her voice. Cold and sharp. "Did you really think you'd be invited?" I remembered years of dismissive smirks, years of being cast as the family's cautionary tale. I remembered that she hadn't just uninvited me from her wedding. She had erased me from her life. Sometimes silence is the only answer left. And yet, I kept every message. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because they were proof that people can learn if too late. Proof that truth, once revealed, cannot be undone. Mom continued her monthly calls, repeating the same line. "She's your sister. Family forgives. But forgiveness without respect is just surrender." And I wasn't surrendering anymore. The family itself split into camps. Aunt Patricia and Uncle James, who had witnessed Victoria's cruelty firsthand, stood firmly in my corner. Others, those who only heard her version of being misunderstood, insisted I was being cruel for holding my boundary. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I had no energy left for debates. Because I had finally understood something vital. You don't need to justify your boundaries to those who never respected them in the first place. As the months passed, Victoria's golden aura dimmed. Robert's company faced layoffs. Their glamorous lifestyle shrank into something ordinary. And though they still lived in their city apartment, it wasn't the penthouse with Central Park views she had once called her destiny. For me, it wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. Every step forward in my career, every article with my name, every contract I signed was a reminder. I had built this without their approval, without their applause, without their belief. I didn't need them to see me anymore. Because I saw myself. And once you recognize your own worth, no one and not even family can erase it. A full year passed before the letter arrived. Not a text, not an email. A real letter, handwritten, tucked inside a cream-colored envelope addressed in a script I knew instantly. I nearly tossed it into the shredder unopened. But curiosity tugged at me. After all, this wasn't another frantic voicemail or manipulative text. It was ink on paper. A deliberate act. I slit the envelope open and unfolded the pages. Her handwriting was the same as when we were kids, slanted, neat, a little dramatic. "Amelia," it began. "It has been 1 year since I made the worst decision of my life. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a reply. I just need you to know that I understand now. Success isn't about titles or salaries or who has the bigger apartment. It's about being the kind of person others want to celebrate. Not for what you have, but for who you are. I failed that test. I failed as a sister. You didn't just become successful, Amelia. You always were. I was too blinded by my own insecurity to see it. I don't want another chance. I just want you to know that I finally see what I lost. It wasn't the penthouse. It wasn't the connections. It was you." I set the letter down on my desk and stared out at the skyline from my 53rd floor office. The Hudson River shimmered in the afternoon. Sunday Central Park stretched green and endless beneath me. My nameplate executive vice president, Blackstone real estate partner, sat, polished, at the edge of my desk. She was right about one thing. Success isn't about titles. But it also isn't about begging for scraps of love from people who only see your value once the world applauds. I thought back to that night outside the St. Regis, shivering in a $200 dress while 500 guests streamed past me. I thought of the cream envelope sliding across the marble counter. I thought of the 47 missed calls that followed. Every detail burned into me like a scar that no longer hurt, but still shaped who I was. Her letter didn't make me cry. It didn't make me soften. But it did make me pause. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because it proved something I had long suspected. People can learn, sometimes only after it's too late. I tucked the letter into my drawer, not as a keepsake of hope, but as evidence. Evidence that my boundaries had forced clarity, that choosing myself had been the right path. Sarah joined me for coffee later that week. She asked if I'd respond. I shook my head. "What's left to say?" She wrote her truth. "I wrote mine a long time ago. Silence is still my answer." Sarah nodded, her loyalty steady as always. "She tells people you two are just going through a rough patch, that you'll come around eventually." I smiled faintly. Let her believe it. If it keeps her going, that's fine, but I've already moved on. And I had. My life was not empty. I had a partner, David, the architect I met on the Tribeca project, who valued me long before my name hit headlines. I had colleagues who respected my expertise, not just my title. I had a circle of friends who toasted me even when the world wasn't watching. Most importantly, I had myself. The letter was not a doorway back. It was a gravestone marker for what once was. Some bridges burn so brightly they light the path forward. And when you've walked that path long enough, you don't look back to see if the ashes are still smoking. A year after her wedding, I wasn't haunted by what I had lost. I was anchored by what I had gained. And though her words sat folded in my drawer, they never changed the truth. I had not abandoned my family. They had abandoned me. I simply chose not to chase them into the fire. It has been exactly 1 year since the night I stood outside the St. Regis, erased from my sister's wedding guest list. 1 year since I chose to walk away, instead of begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. Now I sit in my corner office on the 53rd floor, sunlight spilling across Park Avenue, my nameplate gleaming, Amelia Carter, Executive Vice President. Sometimes I still pause when I see it, not out of disbelief, but out of quiet pride. Earlier this week, Maria Santos from the Women's Shelter visited. She walked into my office beaming, clutching a folder of reports. "The Riverside penthouse sale closed at $3.2 million, she said. That's enough to keep our doors open for 7 years and launch a new job training program. 43 women have already passed through our transitional housing because of your gift. 43 women who were told they were worthless now have a new beginning. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That penthouse had once symbolized my sister's fantasy of success. But in reality, its greatest value was in helping women rebuild lives shattered by rejection, abuse, and despair. What Victoria saw as a luxury, others now saw as hope. As for my family, the noise eventually faded. Mom still leaves voicemails, insisting that family forgives. But forgiveness without respect is just surrender, and I will not surrender my self-worth. Dad writes fewer words, but I can sense the quiet regret in his pauses. The aunts and uncles remain divided, some siding with me, others clinging to Victoria's narrative. And Victoria herself? She still sends letters. I read them, then fold them away. Not out of cruelty, but because some doors, once closed, must remain shut. I have stopped measuring my life by their acceptance. My worth is no longer up for debate at family dinners. My career is no longer dismissed as a hobby. My identity is no longer tied to their vision of me. Instead, my worth is measured by the women who now have a roof over their heads because of that donation. By the colleagues who seek out my leadership. By the partner who loves me without conditions. By the peace I feel every morning when I wake up and know I am no longer invisible. Here's what I've learned. Family is not defined by last names or shared DNA. Family is made of people who see you when the world refuses to. People who clap for you even before the applause begins. People who stay when you have nothing to prove. Sometimes blood family can't give you that. And that's okay. Because the most expensive gift you can ever give yourself is walking away from people who refuse to see your value. I know some of you listening right now are carrying wounds like mine. Maybe you've been underestimated, dismissed, erased. Maybe you've stood outside a door that should have opened for you but didn't. If that's you, hear me clearly. You don't have to keep knocking. You can build your own door. And when you do, you'll find that the people who walk through it are the ones who were meant to stand beside you all along. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to protect your self-respect? Have you ever chosen peace over blood ties? Share your story in the comments, because your words might be the light someone else needs to finally walk away. And if this story resonated with you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, stay with us, and when you're ready, watch the next story waiting for you, another tale of boundaries, resilience, and freedom. Sometimes the ending of one story is the beginning of another. Because the real success, the one that matters, isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about finally seeing yourself as enough. And I promise you this, you already are. When I look back now, I realize that night outside the St. Regis was not a tragedy. It was a turning point. I thought I was losing everything, my place in the family, my reputation, even my dignity. But in truth, I was shedding the weight of expectations that were never mine to carry. For years I tried to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to accept. I thought if I worked hard enough, earned enough, or sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. But visibility built on someone else's approval is fragile. The moment they withdraw it, you vanish. That night, I chose not to vanish. I chose to walk away. And in walking away, I found more than success. I found freedom. Freedom to define myself without apology. Freedom to give without expectation. Freedom to love people who see me, not as a reflection of their pride or shame, but as a whole person worthy of respect. Victoria's letter sits folded in my drawer, a reminder that even those who hurt us can learn, though often too late. I do not hate her. I do not wish her harm, but I no longer need her validation. My life is full with purpose, with people who value me, with peace. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Self-respect is not negotiable. Boundaries are not cruelty. Walking away is not weakness. Sometimes it is the bravest thing you can do. And when you stand firm in who you are, you discover something extraordinary. Success is not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always enough, exactly as you are. That is the kind of success no one can erase.